Hello, everyone. Today we have Matt Mason, all the way from Ignite, Microsoft Ignite in Orlando. He is an expert in custom connector, M extensibility. He is the Power Query god, the creator of all these fancy stuff, and it's very exciting to have him here. Hey, Matt, how are you doing?
Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, yeah. Matt Mason. I've been at Microsoft, I guess, about 12 years now, almost entirely in the data integration space. So I worked on integration services was my first project at Microsoft. I worked on data factory, master data services, data quality services, and I've been on the Power Query team for about 4 years now.
Oh, that's good. So you've been working with all different data integration tools and
Yeah,
features,
that's sort of
which is
been,
great.
yeah, data integration and BI has sort of been my specialty, I guess. It's funny, when I first joined Microsoft, I was coming from a BI background, didn't know anything about data integration, and I sort of fell in love with it. I think it's one of the most interesting challenges in any BI solution. And that I really don't see that going away anytime soon. There's always going to be that data integration challenge. And so I've always just found the space really fascinating.
Right, yes. So what is your taking on getting all of these interesting integration features from SSIS and other tools all coming into Power Query now? Like, for example, we have data flows now. We have we will have fuzzy matching, things like that, which we had it in SSIS. Ability to create custom connectors, all of these things. So do you feel that like SSIS is getting a bit slower pace and Power Query more?
Well, so that's a really interesting thing. And so for years, I've been trying to marry the two things together. And actually, I was going back and looking at blog posts from 2013 where I was talking about this great new data explorer technology.
Yes.
That's later renamed Power Query, and how it could potentially integrate into SSIS. But I mean, Power Query has never been a full ETL tool, right? Like, I think SSIS did a great division of control flow and then your data flow logic. But what Power Query and the mashup engine, M engine, can be is another data flow, right? It's a replacement for the data flow.
Correct.
The main thing that it does really well is the whole query folding thing, right? Being able to push work down to the source. So I don't think it replaces things like like SSIS and ADF, but what I think you will finally see coming up is integration and kind of marriage of the technologies. So things like a Power Query source within SSIS, closer relationship between Power Query and Azure Data Factory as well.
Yeah. Hopefully they have time quickly to bring M source in their tools as well, which is really great. So one of the things you mentioned was really good. Data Explorer, which was, let's say, the very first name of Power Query back in 2013. I remember the first time that you showed me. We've been both in, I think, TechEd Hong Kong, and you grabbed your laptop and showed me, you see this tool, Data Explorer? It is coming like in a few days, and I've been really excited. Wow, what's that? And now we got Power Query with all these interesting things. One of the things that we noticed a lot in Power Query is the UI changes, which brings a lot of functionality from M code into the UI. But the M code itself is not changing that much. It is changing. There are a few functions adding every, let's say, few months and on. But do you see somewhere in the future that we have, let's say, more M library of functions?
So the M language itself really hasn't changed. There hasn't been new operators in a long time. If you look at the language spec, I don't think it's been touched since 2014, maybe 2015. But yeah, the main additions to the language are the built-in functions and libraries. And so every month there's new functions being added, either data source functions or utility functions that are being added for different scenarios. Internally, the M engine is actually used in a lot of different places that don't necessarily get surfaced. And sometimes there's some recent blog posts and discussions. There's some things that leak out that really aren't meant or even possible through Power Query consumption, but are used for other things.
Yes.
So one of the main extensibility points we've been focused on, of course, is adding new custom connectors. That's really been the main demand. But shortly after that, or now that the custom connector stuff is landing, you'll see extensibility for function libraries. Right? And one of the things I'm really passionate about is actually making a better developer experience for Power Query itself for the extensibility. And that's actually my primary role right now, like adding the IntelliSense into Power BI Desktop. And then furthering the SDK and the different tools. And so you'll see more tooling for adding function libraries. I'd love to see reuse. I think once we release the custom connector story, there was immediate questions on Twitter, like, are we going to see NuGet for AMP? And then, I'd love to see something like that where you could pull in helper functions. I know I have a set of common helper functions that I use when I'm writing custom connectors, and I'm pretty sure it's the same for many other people.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So actually, I believe at Ignite, we showed some new function extensibility in Power Query Online, specifically around the data flows, around adding new ML functions. Right, being able to plug in these dynamic functions to enhance and enrich your data. You can imagine similar functionality showing up in all Power Query experiences for just adding in useful library functions.
Oh, that's interesting. That was actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask about, like kind of ability to create custom functions, but not through custom connectors, just custom function itself, which is great. You already explained that. So talking about those custom connectors, so we can now create custom connectors, which is a really great thing. And these custom connectors are helping us to connect to different sources that we have. When we create our custom connectors, we have ability to connect to, like, let's say, OLEDB data sources, I don't know, Edu.NET data sources. What about a data source that is somehow different, is not in a data sources that we have in our list that we can connect to? I don't have, let's say, a specific example to mention, but let's say SAP uses a specific method of connection which is not there. So for those, is there a way that we can write a connector for those as well?
So not today, and so we've been going back and forth on that. So basically, the entire M extensibility model is you can't call out to arbitrary code, but you call out to our supported interfaces. You're basically reusing existing M functions, and that helps us maintain the magic of M with the whole query folding, right?
Yes.
So certain functions like if you're calling OData or ODBC, there's built-in, they understand query folding by default. And just by inheriting or basically wrapping those functions, you get a lot of that functionality as well. Now, there's some things that we have to do in the engine to enable basically the credentials to flow through properly when you're creating a custom data source. And there's a number of security-related issues that can potentially come up there. And so we limit the extensibility to very specific data source functions. In the future, we may open that up a little bit more, but today what we're finding is with our existing interfaces, so web, OData, ODBC, ADO.NET, OLEDB, you can pretty much connect to any data source.
Yes,
I think the main gap right now is connecting to local files. And there's a whole number of security things that come up around that, being able to, because we eventually want all these connectors to be able to run in our cloud services, right? And so local file access would not be a great thing there. So the fallback that a lot of custom connector developers are using is going through ODBC or ADO.NET. Right, so if you can call into your ADO.NET provider, that's basically a way for you to plug in arbitrary code. It also means that the connector will never run in our service. It will require to be deployed with a gateway, but it at least gives you that workaround. And we've seen some really interesting connectors from a PowerShell connector, right, where you can actually call PowerShell from an M-query. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that.
That's really
but yeah, I've seen lots of interesting workarounds like that.
That's really cool, and also the M intelligence that's really helpful. I think that recently, everywhere I see people are all excited about wow M intelligence, really cool things. Thank you for developing that. One other thing that I would like, probably it's not on Power BI team priority list of things to do, but as a developer, I have a developer background, you have a developer background as well. I write codes in .NET and things like that, or at least I wrote some time ago. I would like to run my M code inside, let's say, a .NET library. Is that thing coming sometime in the future in Power BI? Do you feel that?
I would love to do that, and I mean we're set up in a way to do that. And actually internally, a lot of teams are doing that, right? Like they basically embed the mashup engine. That's essentially how the gateway works. Our technology is actually embedded in a lot of different Microsoft products behind the scenes. We've been going back and forth on how do we release this out like as a standalone library that people can use. And really the main thing that's holding us back is the amount of work that our team is doing. Right? Like I always joke that Power Query is taking over the world. We're going to be, Power Query Online is going to be lighting up in at least 3 new experiences in the next few months. And opening up another surface area is a bit daunting right now.
Yeah.
Because overall we're really small team and we're iterating really fast, and we have been. I think Power Query shipped monthly since 2014. And yeah, so short answer is eventually. I think we're still figuring out how kind of the business model behind that and how that would work. I've been having some meetings with the VS Code team recently, and I think there's some really interesting stuff that we can do there in terms of integrating a Power Query experience into VS Code and sort of
nice.
what that can potentially lead to. I mean, definitely for creating the custom connectors through VS Code, but just the general data wrangling experience or data prep or whatever the buzzword is now. An experience for developers to be able to shape code in a reusable way and embed it inside of applications. Right, so I see a ton of potential.
That's good.
It's just a matter of getting there.
I'll watch that with my fingers crossed
to
get those.
I've been hoping for the same thing for a while now. But yeah, there's always one more data source to connect to. There's always one more feature to add from Power BI. So yeah, it's always a trade-off in priority.
That's great thing to know. These custom connectors, going back to the custom connectors again, these custom connectors that we create, these are not just for Power BI, right? We can use it in, I don't know, let's say Power App, Flow, and things like that, or it needs specific changes.
So today we're primarily focused on Power BI. So they'll only work in Power BI today. That said, we will be GAing the functionality very soon. Which means that Excel generally doesn't pick up our preview features. They will integrate with the release stuff. So that means custom connectors will likely show up in Excel next. And then there'll also be some announcements around integrating with Flow and Power Apps. So yeah, anyway, they'll be showing up in all of the Power Query experiences eventually. The main piece of infrastructure that we've landed in the past few months is the gateway support, right? So enabling custom connectors through gateways basically lets you take your connector, drop it in a local directory, the gateway reads it, registers its functions with the service so that our service is now aware that, okay, when I see a function or this specific function, I know I can send that query down to the gateway to get resolved. And so that starts lighting up a lot of different scenarios. And the custom connectors are designed in a way to be completely metadata driven and stuff. One of the development principles that we've had with Power Query is that we should never have any data source specific work. Right? Like when we enable a new data source, we drop it in and it just lights up everywhere because we know we want to rapidly add new data sources. We've been expanding it. And so it's taken us longer than expected to get that infrastructure in place. But now that we have, I think we have the opportunity to start lighting up connectors everywhere, basically.
Correct. Nice. Okay, that sounds good. Do you think the monetization of custom connector is somewhere in the plan? Because right now the MEZ file that is generated is kind of accessible. So is it somehow in the plan to make it like custom visuals that people can monetize?
So it's never been one of our priorities. What we see instead of monetizing the connector, people generally monetize the service itself, right?
Yeah,
And so our certification program right now is really geared at people who own the APIs rather than the connector development. There's already many third-party SDKs for creating connectors.
yeah.
We're primarily just yeah, I always recommend you don't put a lot of your IP and core functionality into the connector piece itself. You put it into the service and the API or driver,
Correct.
and those are the things that you monetize. Right? Like we have some partners that will sell that sell the driver itself, the ODBC driver, but then the connector just sort of comes with it. So when we get to Office Store integration, which was unfortunately delayed longer than I'd like, but when we finally have Office Store integration, like custom visuals, it sort of opens up the opportunity for monetization. But I still don't recommend that as a path. It's more you really want to monetize the service or the underlying driver rather than the connector itself.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Outside of all of these interesting talks about custom connectors, you are one of the famous presenters of BI Power Hour. I think you and Matthew were first people who started that. Are you planning to do those Power BI Power Hour type of
More
things again?
hours. So the funny thing is, I actually joined Power Hour kind of late. So Power Hour went on for, I think it goes back to Bill Baker, who started it ages ago. And I joined in just because I saw it once and I fell in love with the whole concept of doing these fun demos, like especially at a tech conference, especially near the last day when you've
Yeah.
been 5 days of full sessions. It's fun to just have a relaxing, turn your brain off and laugh type session.
Yeah, correct.
But at the same time, listening to fun stories, right? The whole point of the Power Hour is showing how you can tell a fun story using technology. Fortunately, a lot of people miss the fact that that's the whole point of the Power Hour, that there is actually meaning behind it. But anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I fell in love with it, and then the original presenter, or the presenter before me, moved on to something else, and so then Matthew and I took over. I invited Matthew to be the MC because he's just fantastic at it. Um, but I hear there might be a Power Hour coming up at a summit later on this year.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm still going back and forth. One of the things about Power Hour is that even though the demo is like 5-10 minutes, and it comes off sounding extremely unpracticed and casual and ad hoc, there's a ton of work that goes into preparing those demos.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these days I just don't seem to have the time to do that. So we'll see. I think I'll stay on as Power Hour consultant and help other people kind of create great demos. But I think my days of presenting the Power Hour are over.
Yeah, hopefully we get you doing something similar to that in Infinity. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay, great, awesome, thank you. Do you have any last words for our audience who wants to learn about
No.
custom connectors and things like that?
No, I mean, custom connectors, I mean, M in general, so I was pretty new to functional programming in general. It took me a little bit to learn. But now that I'm using M regularly, especially for connectors, I've just fallen in love with the technology. And reusing a lot of the powerful features that are just built in there, you can create connectors really, really quickly. So it's a bit daunting at first, but once you get over the initial hurdles, yeah, you can do a lot with the language when it comes to data manipulation. And as we see Power Query and M, go out into more and more technology and become more widespread, the investment, time, and learning it, I think, is really going to be worthwhile.
Great, thank you. And from community side and from user side, I would like to thank you and the team doing all those great work. It's all fascinating. I don't know what I would be doing if there was no Power Query or M. Awesome. Thank you, and thank you for your time joining us.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.